This is just a short video as a class synopsis of the first uh, landscape painting class of the summer semester. And today I had the idea and we presented the viewfinder and what a viewfinder is and how it works. I presented Corot's paintings from the 1820s and some things that came up in addition to my original intention for today, which was great, was the idea of composition and the center, middle ground, foreground, and background, and the sublime. And since in class a lot of times I'm talking separately to people out in the field when they're making their landscape paintings, I like to try to collect everything together into a short synopsis in case you missed some of the things that got spoken about, because some of them are really helpful. So just to make sure we're all on the same page, even though it seems really simple, the idea of kind of chopping up space and dividing up space into something manageable, right? The landscape is so complicated that if you can kind of get a sense of these big chunks of what it is, that there's a middle ground, foreground, and background, and start thinking like that, it'll it'll help make sense in a particular fashion of what it is that you're looking at. As far as the viewfinder, I had these kind of pieces of cardboard that we cut out today, and I think many people had used viewfinders before, but they had used the ones that had maybe a more narrow frame. And I think that having a slightly wider frame is super helpful because there's something about more being hidden that's outside the image that allows us to be a little bit more intentional and considerate about how we're framing the device. Also, during class, I showed that you can just put a piece of tape across if you need to change the proportion. Just put a piece of tape here that you can move around depending on what you're going to draw. And this isn't just like a modern idea. These are slides that I have from another class that I have. And this is Albert Dürer from 1525, a print. And it was common to transfer an object's appearance onto some kind of flat structure, right? This is the nature of painting, is making this transference, this how can you say it, this projection onto a flat plane of a three-dimensional object in space. And this is a rather strange thing to do, to make it legible, to make it readable, to make it tradable and shareable. And so this is an example of somebody drawing on a grid uh, a human form, and they're looking through another grid. And this is something that continued throughout Western art as I know it. And people like Van Gogh, who often is considered a very expressionistic artist, but if you look at it from another angle, he's actually quite formulaic, and he had a grid built for himself, and he used that regularly to draw and paint the landscape. So this idea today of bringing back the viewfinder is really good to check ourselves and to see that, for example, in this picture, that this, if you chose this as your viewfinder, that this tree has a slight angle to it, right? And if you went to draw that without a viewfinder, you might just assume it's up and down. So the process is you would check this line against the line that is on that's on your sketchbook, and then you would have these two horizontal or two vertical plumb lines that you're kind of constantly help you relate to what it is that you're drawing. And again, it's about making the process a little bit more manageable. Now, so we went over the viewfinder and middle ground, foreground, background, and now I want to launch into the really fun stuff, which is Corot's paintings. And so I'm just going to show many people, it seems, have not seen these paintings, which are a real treasure. The first time I saw them was in the Frick Museum in New York City. The beautiful, they're very small, especially the ones that are in more warm hues. And they're kind of like I think of them as part of the gestation, the beginning of a kind of gestural landscape painting. Before this is, of course, before this is 1820s, and we're before tube paint, and this is, as far as I know, yeah, this is kind of the beginning of a particular lineage of landscape painting, and they're really worth spending some time with. Corot's other paintings are far more kind of heavy and have these kind of compositional narratives in the landscape, but they don't have this kind of piece to piece that is very instructional that these more gestural plein air pieces have. There's many of them that are kind of banal in nature, which is also what's poignant about them. So I'll rifle through these pretty quick. Since you're seeing this as a video, you can come back to this and pause it. There's a couple of things I want to point out. Um, several students today were drawing a tree, and there was kind of a purple shade that was used to define that tree trunk. And he's excellent for just seeing how big of a value or color jump you want to make to define a form. Um, and we can also use him to talk about something that came up with, well, here we can just give an example. So this is foreground, middle ground, kind of something, maybe this foreground becoming middle ground, and then background. And in here, I guess you could divide this into a four. He kind of pushes the middle into the foreground if you start to look at it like that, and then you have background. It's fun to just kind of trace through these in terms of that notion and how he thinks about that. Where is the foreground, middle ground, and background in these? Another thing that's interesting about Corot is his drawings in comparison to the paintings. They definitely seem to have a more romantic, philosophical tone to them than there's a matter of factness to these studies that feels like kind of registering what is, or at least pretending to do so, right? Or at least having the conceit of registering what is there. The One of the things that came up with someone's painting today was the idea of the center and compositions, and he's definitely a master of paying attention to the center. You might not realize it at first, but many of these paintings play a funny game with the center. For example, this line here feels very much in the center, but it takes us a while to come to that. And that's what came up with a student today, where there was a tree that was dead center, an example we were looking at, but because the only animal in the painting was a deer, to the left, our focus came to that first. And so the question of the center, it's not cut and dry to just say, oh, don't put something in the center. It can be a little bit more nuanced, especially at the level that we're all at in class right now. For example, this again is he's very close to kind of bisecting the painting in a way, but we don't really arrive at that, right? So maybe we could think more of what's where, more as a game of when and how we arrive at the place in the painting. And then let's see, lastly, one of the things that came up today was the idea of the sublime. So I brought up the sublime at the end of class because we were looking at one of their students' paintings, and this is Turner, and this is like a whole nother end of the spectrum, about 100 years later in the history of landscape painting, where this is the British painting, and we have the idea of the sublime, the kind of awe-inspiring aspect of nature. If you haven't seen these paintings, they're definitely worth looking at. Turner's kind of series of paintings of water and fires. And I have a little quote here about the sublime. It was at this point in history of the word sublime, right? Because there's been many layers to the history of sublime. So this references to British painting, that visual artists became deeply intrigued by the challenge of representing it, asking how can an artist paint the sensation that we experience when words fail or when we find ourselves beyond the limits of reason. So I'll just throw that quote up here so that you can have it. And then these are two websites that you can peruse at your leisure. One, this is a great little article I found that has a bunch of quotes from Corot about painting. Things like the most important things to study are shape and tonal values. These two things for me are the only serious points of any study of art. Color and execution add charm to the work. And so these quotes are just they're interesting to think about as kind of launching off points, but as I think it's good to take an artist's words with it with a grain of salt, a splash of salt. If when you want to study or want to do a study or a picture, first try out the shape in your head. When you have tried it out in all sorts of ways, then move on to the values. Look for them in blocks. Be conscientious. He has several quotes about kind of imagining the whole painting before laying it out, which I think is quite interesting. And that's one way to paint. And then the other article I wanted to point out is the one that is on the Sublime. And this is a really good one at the Tate. And this is a whole series of articles about the art of Sublime with respect to their collection, which it seems to be like mostly a British based, but it goes over kind of the Baroque Sublime, the Romantic, the Victorian, and the modern. And it has a lot of good images and talks about the definition of sublime. And so I was dealing with the Romantic Sublime here, which I've been aware of due to in the United States when you had the American painters representing the wilderness of the Northeast and the Hudson River School and everything, kind of referencing that time period and that kind of painting of England as I understand it. So yeah, that's just kind of the general synopsis of what happened today, and I just wanted to leave that with everybody. And I'll have the links in our website and everything. Okay, see you next week.